the vigil of 7 mirrors. Obsidian Castle never truly slept. Even at dawn, when the sky was a thin, bruised gray and the torches burned low, the ancient stones held whispers, old vows, old betrayals, old love that refused to die. In the forgotten West Tower, behind a door sealed with runes so ancient even the council pretended not to remember them, a man sat alone, and watched his own home like a stranger. King Kale Nightborn, ruler of the Obsidian Dominion, feared by rival courts, obeyed by the shadows themselves, did not need breath, yet he exhaled anyway. Not because his body demanded it but because his heart did. Or what was left of it. 7 enchanted mirrors circled him like pale moons. Each mirror pulsed with a dim crimson glow, fed by a blood ink ritual that still stained Kale's fingertips a dark, wine-colored shade. The spell wasn't meant for entertainment. It was truth magic, raw, unflinching, cruelly honest. And Kale had sworn he would never use it on someone he cared about. Yet here he was. Because grief can make a king cautious, and fatherhood can make him ruthless. The central mirror showed the nursery, 3 cradles aligned perfectly, carved from black oak and inlaid with silver sigils. Above them hung a mobile of crystal stars that turned slowly, catching the faint morning light. In each cradle lay a miracle that should not have existed at all. 3 infants. 3 heirs. 3 pieces of Kale's late queen. They were only 6 months old. Alden with the silver crescent. Soren with the obsidian raven. Riven with the thorned rose. Kale's jaw clenched as the smallest sound rose from the nursery, first a soft whimper, then a tremble of need, and then the crying became a storm. One baby's distress sparked the others until the room filled with that helpless chorus that could break even an immortal's discipline. Kale leaned forward, his gaze locked. "Someone will go to them," he murmured, more like a prayer than a statement. The nursery door opened, and the woman who entered wore silk like a crown. Lady Seraphine Valemont moved into view, tall, beautiful, polished like a blade. Her night-dark hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her robe was the deep crimson of fresh roses. In court, she smiled like candlelight. In public, she spoke of duty, devotion, stability, everything the council wanted in a queen for a grieving king. But the mirrors did not show public. The mirrors showed truth. Seraphine stopped in the doorway and stared at the 3 crying infants the way someone might stare at mud on a perfect dress. Her face twisted just slightly but enough. "Again?" she muttered, not bothering to soften the disgust in her voice. "All 3? Must they always cry together?" Kale's fingers curled around the stone armrest. The urge to appear, right now this second, burned like lightning under his skin. But he forced himself to stay hidden. He had begun this test for a reason. He needed proof. Seraphine swept closer, but she did not lift a single child. She tapped Alden's blanket with one finger, checking it as if the baby were a troublesome object. "You're fed," she snapped at the air, as though the infants could understand. "You're clean. So what is this? What are you demanding now? Attention?" Her lips pulled back in a humorless smile. "Of course." Alden's tiny hands reached toward her, trembling with need. His cries sharpened, pleading. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Oh, don't look at me like that." She leaned closer, voice dropping into a low hiss. "You're not princes in here. In here you're a problem." Kale's vision flickered red at the edges. Seraphine glanced toward the corridor as if afraid the walls might betray her. Then she spoke again, softer, more poisonous. "If I had any say, you wouldn't be here." Her gaze swept over the 3 cradles. "You'd be sent away somewhere quiet, forgotten. And then this castle would finally be mine without—" She waved a hand at them. "These interruptions." Soren let out a cry so sharp it seemed to stab the mirror itself. Seraphine flinched, then straightened, offended that a child dared disturb her. "Enough," she snapped. "Cry until your throats ache. I'm not your nursemaid." And then she turned and left. She closed the door behind her. The sound of it, wood against stone, hit Kale like a slap. In the West Tower the air dropped cold. Frost licked the mirror's edges. Kale's fangs lengthened before he forced them back down, swallowing rage like it was fire. He wanted to believe he had imagined the signs. The tightness in Seraphine's smile when the babies fussed. The impatience she masked too quickly. The way her warmth faded the moment no nobles were watching. He wanted to believe he was simply broken from loss. But the mirrors were not broken. They were honest. Kale's late queen Eloin had died the night she gave him these sons, 3 lives born out of one. The kingdom had celebrated. The castle had filled with songs. The council had toasted the future. And then Eloin's heartbeat had stopped. Kale remembered her final words as if they were carved into his bones. Protect them. Love them. Let no unworthy hands touch what we made. After the funeral, Kale had sworn he would never remarry unless he was certain. Not because he feared loneliness, but because he feared the wrong person standing beside his children. The council of course didn't share that fear. They feared instability. They feared rivals. They feared a king who loved too fiercely because love could be used against him. And so they pushed Seraphine Vailmont into his life. Noble blood, powerful allies, flawless manners, eyes like velvet storms. For months she played the role beautifully. In court, she cradled the triplets for visiting dignitaries. She praised Kale's strength through grief. She spoke gently of family and legacy. She made speeches with trembling sincerity. The nobles adored her. Kale almost did too. Because part of him wanted the pain to stop. Part of him wanted someone to share the weight of the crown in the nursery and the endless nights. So he let himself lean toward her. Then the small things began. And then, the mirrors began. He had resurrected an old tradition of his bloodline, the Vigil of Shadows, a test so ancient it was whispered like a myth. A ruler would depart the castle, leaving a potential consort in authority, while secretly watching through truth mirrors. Not to trap them, only to reveal them. 3 days ago, Kale announced to the council that he must travel north to negotiate with a rival court. He staged goodbyes. He sent ravens. He sealed letters. Seraphine smiled in front of everyone. And when the last courtier bowed and the doors shut, her smile had slipped too fast. So Kale stayed. He vanished into shadow paths only the night-born blood could open, sealed himself in the West Tower, and woke the mirrors with blood magic and grief. Now, as the nursery cries echoed faintly through the spell, Kale watched Seraphine pour herself wine in the great hall, calm, composed, unbothered, while his sons cried behind a closed door. 5 minutes passed. 10. The infant's cries rose and broke and rose again, desperate now, hoarse. Kale's hands shook with restrained fury. And then the mirror caught movement in the servants' corridor, quick, purposeful footsteps. A young woman in a simple blue dress and a white apron appeared, breathless as if she'd been running. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her shift didn't begin until afternoon. But she didn't hesitate at all. She pushed open the nursery door. And the moment she stepped inside, everything changed. She moved like someone responding to a loved one's pain. Shoo, sweet stars, she whispered, voice trembling with tenderness. I'm here. I'm here. She lifted Riven first, careful and practiced. Then she tucked Soren against her shoulder and reached for Alden with her free arm, somehow balancing all three as if she'd been born for this. The infants clung to her. And then she began to sing. Kale's entire body went still. Because the lullaby was not common. It wasn't a tavern tune. Not a nursery rhyme. Not a servant's song. It was Eloan's lullaby. A melody Eloan had hummed during her pregnancy while walking the battlements with one hand on her belly and one hand in Kale's. A song she had sung in those brief hours after the births, before death stole her voice forever. Only a handful of people in the entire castle had heard it. Kale pressed closer to the mirror as if he could step through it. The young woman's eyes were wet with tears as she rocked the triplets. Her voice was soft, imperfect, human, yet the babies calmed as if the song itself was a shield. Moon above, she sang quietly, shadow deep, guard these souls while kingdoms sleep. Blood and bone, star and stone. You are loved, you're not alone. The crying faded. Alden's tiny fists unclenched. Soren's face relaxed against her shoulder. Riven's lashes fluttered as he drifted toward sleep. And the woman, this invisible servant, kissed each baby's forehead with a tenderness that looked like devotion. Kale's dead heart did something it hadn't done in months. It ached. The woman lowered herself into the rocking chair by the nursery window and whispered as if confiding in the dawn itself. I'm sorry I wasn't faster, she murmured. I should have checked sooner. But I'm here now. Your mama would never let you cry alone. Kale's throat tightened. Your mama. The woman's gaze flicked toward the door, fear, habit, caution, then back to the babies. Your father, he tries, she whispered, voice breaking. He tries so hard. But grief makes even kings blind. Kale sat back, stunned. Who was she? The castle staff knew her only as Mara, the quiet cleaning woman assigned to forgotten corridors. She spoke to no one unless spoken to. She kept her head down. She scrubbed stone floors while nobles glided above her like the world belonged to them. But the way she held the princes, it wasn't employment. It was love. Mara reached into her apron pocket and pulled out 3 braided cords, silver, black, and red, tied with intricate knots. Protective charms. Old magic. the kind Aloan used to weave when she was anxious. Mara hung one above each cradle, whispering words in an ancient language Cale hadn't heard since his childhood. A language only the old royal bloodlines knew. Cale's eyes widened. A cleaning woman should not know those words. A cleaning woman should not have Aloan's lullaby in her throat. A cleaning woman should not carry royal protective charms as if they were sacred. Unless a memory slammed into Cale like thunder. The birthing chamber. The storm. Aloan's hand, blood-streaked, gripping the wrist of a young maid as she whispered a final vow. Cale's breath caught. Mara wasn't just a cleaner. She was the one Aloan trusted in her last moments. The one who had taken a blood oath. The one who had stayed in the castle, invisible and underestimated, to protect the triplets when everyone else looked away. While Seraphine plotted her rise, Mara guarded the princes with hands that trembled from exhaustion but never from disloyalty. Cale's gaze snapped to another mirror, one that showed the great hall. Seraphine lounged on velvet cushions, wine in hand, laughing lightly with a minor advisor. Her voice was airy, pleasant, charming. A performance. Cale looked back at the nursery mirror. Mara whispered into Alden's hair, "You're safe. I promise. Even if I have to stand in front of darkness itself." Cale's jaw tightened. Because darkness itself was exactly what he was. And yet, for the first time since Aloan's death, Cale felt something unfamiliar beneath the grief. Not peace. Not relief. But purpose. This wasn't only about proving Seraphine's cruelty. This was about discovering why Mara, quiet, poor, powerless, carried a queen's lullaby like a weapon. And why his sons recognized her arms as home. Cale rose slowly from the black stone chair. His cloak shifted like living shadow. The mirrors hummed, sensing his decision. This test, he whispered to the cold tower, voice rough with emotion he had tried to bury, was meant to reveal a queen. His eyes narrowed, burning with silent promise. But it may reveal something far rarer. His gaze returned to Mara's face reflected in the nursery mirror, tearful, brave, gentle, and stubbornly standing between his children and neglect. Cale's voice dropped. It may reveal the one person in this castle who truly deserves my trust. Below, in the nursery, Mara finished the lullaby and rested her cheek against Soren's soft hair. She didn't know a king was watching her. She didn't know shadows listened. But she felt something, some shift in the air, like the castle itself had inhaled. Mara froze, eyes lifting toward the corners of the room. As if she sensed she was no longer alone. And in the West Tower, King Cale Nightborn stared at the mirrors and made a vow. Not to the council, not to politics, not even to his crown. A vow to 3 sleeping infants, and 1 cleaning woman with a queen's song in her throat. Because if Seraphine truly planned to remove his heirs, then Cale would not simply expose her. He would make the entire kingdom watch her fall. And if Mara truly carried Aloan's last promise, then Cale would find out why fate had kept her close. Even if the truth shattered everything he thought he knew. The mask of a future queen. Obsidian Castle wore daylight like a lie. When the sun climbed, weak and pale behind winter clouds, the halls filled with order. Servants moving in practiced lines, advisors carrying sealed scrolls, guards in black armor standing like statues. Everything looked stable. Everything looked loyal. But King Cale Nightborn had learned the most dangerous snakes didn't strike in daylight. They smiled. From the West Tower, Cale watched the mirrors shift with soft, crimson pulses, each glass surface a living eye. The blood ink spell was steady now, warmed by his will. He could feel the castle's ancient magic humming under his skin like a second heartbeat. In the nursery mirror, Mara moved quietly between cradles, fixing blankets, adjusting pillows, checking tiny fingers and toes with careful hands. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders tight from carrying 3 infants at once. Yet her tenderness never weakened. Cale's gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. Not because he trusted easily, but because she was the first person he'd seen in months who wasn't trying to take something from him. She was giving. In another mirror, Lady Seraphine Valemont swept into the great hall as if she owned it already. She had changed gowns, changed hair, changed expression. She wore midnight blue silk, silver combs pinned into her dark curls. Her face was warm now, softened, sympathetic, gracious. She moved like a hymn, every step calculated to look effortless. Cale's eyes narrowed. A queen in public. A viper in private. Seraphine approached the council table where the advisors had gathered, pretending to review documents Cale had left behind. When she spoke, her voice carried the perfect tone, firm enough to sound capable, gentle enough to sound humble. "My lords," she said, hands folded modestly. His Majesty trusted me with stability during his absence. I will not fail him. I reviewed the grain reports from the eastern provinces. Winter will be harsh. We should increase the reserve shipments before the first heavy snow. Councillor Varric Thorn, a vampire nearly as old as Cale's reign, nodded approvingly. Wise counsel, Lady Valemont, he murmured. The king chose well. Seraphine lowered her eyes, the picture of devotion. I only serve the realm, and the princes. They are my constant concern. Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. If the mirrors hadn't shown him the truth, he might have believed her too. That was the sickest part. Seraphine's performance was not sloppy. It was excellent. And excellent liars were the hardest to kill, politically or otherwise, because people wanted to believe them. The meeting continued. Seraphine made suggestions about trade routes, posed thoughtful questions about border patrols, spoke carefully about noble alliances. Her competence wasn't faked. Cale could admit that. Under different circumstances she might have been an effective partner. But effective didn't mean safe. When the council finally adjourned, Seraphine smiled at each advisor as they left, touching a wrist here, murmuring a compliment there, placing seeds of loyalty like coins in pockets. Then when the last footsteps faded, her smile dropped. She turned toward a young scribe, voice cooling instantly. You'll bring me the genealogy ledger. The older one. I want to see which bloodlines will resist me. The scribe bowed, nervous. Yes, my lady. Seraphine's eyes sharpened. Don't call me my lady in private. You may call me your grace. The scribe blinked. But, His Majesty. Seraphine stepped closer, her beauty suddenly dangerous. His Majesty is away. And while he is away, I decide what language becomes normal in this castle. She walked past him like he was dust. Cale's fingers flexed. Every second Seraphine acted like a queen, she trained the castle to accept her. That was how power worked, slowly, quietly, by repetition. Cale looked away from her mirror and shifted to the nursery. Mara was seated in the rocking chair, Soren cradled in her arms while Alden and Riven lay awake in their cradles, watching her with sleepy focus. Mara whispered to them like they were the only truth left in the world. Your mama used to say babies dream of starlight, she murmured. That's why you stare at the ceiling like you're searching for the sky. Her smile wavered, turning bittersweet. I wonder if you can see her. Cale's throat tightened. No one spoke of Queen Aloan anymore. It was considered too painful. The court had wrapped her memory in silk and locked it away as if silence was respect. But Mara spoke her name without fear, without politics, like love was meant to be spoken. Mara shifted Soren carefully, then began to talk in a hushed tone, as if telling a secret to the baby's souls. Let me tell you about the night you were born, she whispered. There was thunder. The kind that shakes even vampire bones. And your mother, she was brave. So brave. She smiled even when her hands trembled. Mara's voice broke. She swallowed and continued. She made me promise. She said, Mara, if something happens to me, you watch them. They will need someone who remembers me when grief makes their father silent. Cale went still. His jaw tightened so hard it hurt. He remembered that night differently, through rage and panic and blood. He remembered Aloan's eyes, the way they pleaded. He remembered promising, swearing, breaking inside. But he did not remember Mara's oath. He hadn't truly seen Mara that night. Because a king had been too busy losing his queen. And now, in a mirror, he was watching the consequences of that blindness. Mara reached into her apron and pulled out something small and cloth-wrapped. When she opened it, Cale's breath caught. 3 braided cords, silver, black, and red. Protective charms. Aloan's work. Mara hung them above the cradles, whispering words Cale hadn't heard spoken aloud since the old court. A tongue of ancient vows and binding magic. Cale leaned closer. He couldn't catch every syllable through the mirror, but he felt the intent. The spell wasn't meant to harm. It was meant to shield. Alden yawned, tiny mouth opening wide. Riven blinked slowly, soothed. Mara's shoulders finally relaxed a fraction. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor outside the nursery. Mara froze, eyes wide as if she'd been caught stealing treasure. The nursery door opened, and Seraphine entered with a guest. Lady Cordelia Ashwin, a high-ranking noblewoman from the Western Territories, a vote that would matter in any coronation, any council conflict, any future succession. Seraphine's smile returned instantly, warm, elegant, perfect. Lady Cordelia, she said sweetly, gesturing around the nursery, this is where our little princes rest. I personally oversee every detail of their care. Cale felt his rage flare. The lie was effortless. Mara, in the corner, kept her gaze lowered, folding blankets like she was invisible. Cordelia cooed near the cradles. They're beautiful. The realm is blessed. Alden stirred, and then he cried. Then Soren. Then Riven. A chorus. Cordelia chuckled lightly. Ah, feeding time? Seraphine's smile twitched. Her eyes flicked toward Mara like a whip. Actually, Seraphine said through tight teeth, they were supposed to be settled before this visit. She snapped her fingers. You there? Mara looked up, startled. Seraphine's voice sharpened with false politeness. Leave the room. I need privacy. Mara blinked. My lady, they need? Seraphine stepped closer, blocking Cordelia's view with her body, her voice lowering into a whisper that carried venom. I said leave. Mara's hands trembled. But the princes are. Seraphine's eyes flashed, cold and threatening. Know your place, cleaning woman, she hissed. Or you'll find yourself scrubbing dungeon floors until your hands bleed. Mara went pale. Kale's claws extended involuntarily. Mara swallowed hard, curtsied and backed toward the door. Her eyes darted to the cradles one last time, anguish, guilt, fear. And then she left. The door closed behind her. Inside, Seraphine turned back to Cordelia, smoothing her hair as if nothing happened. Forgive the noise, she said sweetly. Servants can be slow. Cordelia smiled, unaware. It's no trouble. Babies cry. But Seraphine's gaze kept flicking toward the cradles with irritation, not concern. She moved to the window, steering Cordelia away. Kale watched, memorizing every moment. Every lie. Every cruel flicker. This was why he needed proof. Seraphine could charm half the kingdom with her public face. If he struck too soon, she would cry innocence and the council would split and political allies would rise to defend her. Kale needed the kind of truth no one could deny. The kind that lived in mirrors. That night, the castle dimmed into twilight. Torches glowed along corridors. Snow began to fall beyond the stained glass windows. Servants moved softly, like the whole world was holding its breath. Kale shifted focus to another mirror, one he rarely watched, set to view a small unused parlor in the eastern wing. At first, the room appeared empty. Then the shadows moved. A cloaked figure stepped from darkness, robes blacker than the castle's stone, face hidden beneath a hood. Not a council advisor. Not a noble. This was someone who dealt in secrets. Seraphine stood waiting, hands folded calmly as if she were meeting a friend for tea. You're late, she said coolly. The robed figure's voice rasped. I came unseen. As requested. Seraphine's lips curved. Good. Now, tell me again the plan. I want it perfect. Kale's entire body stiffened. The robed figure spoke in a low tone. The realm adores him as a grieving father. That is his armor. But armor can be removed, if tragedy strikes again. Seraphine's eyes glinted. You mean the princes? A tragic accident, the figure continued. A sickness, an unfortunate fire. Something that draws sympathy, and leaves him shattered. Seraphine didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. The princes are the obstacle, she said flatly. They will always be. The kingdom will never fully accept me while they remain the symbols of his dead queen. The robed figure's head tilted. Then we proceed as discussed. The monastery will accept them within the month. A generous payment will ensure they are kept out of sight. Seraphine's smile sharpened. Out of sight is not enough. Kale felt the room drop colder. The robed figure paused. Your meaning? Seraphine's voice turned soft, almost pleasant. I want them forgotten. Kale's vision tinted red. The robed figure exhaled. That is permanent. Seraphine shrugged as if discussing furniture. Permanent problems require permanent solutions. Kale's hands shook with contained violence. This wasn't a woman annoyed by children. This was a woman plotting removal of heirs. This was treason. Murder. A threat to the bloodline. Kale rose from the stone chair so fast it scraped the floor. The mirrors trembled. The tower's runes flickered as his power surged. He forced himself to remain hidden, only barely, because he needed one more thing. He needed how. He needed the details. He leaned closer, forcing calm into his voice like iron. The robed figure said, we must be careful. If His Majesty suspects. Seraphine's eyes hardened. He won't. He trusts me. He wants to trust me. Grief makes people desperate for comfort. She stepped closer to the cloaked figure, voice lowering. But I want more than the crown. The figure tilted its head. More? Seraphine's smile became a blade. I want him tied to me. Bound. Not just politically. Kale's stomach twisted. blood magic, binding spells, a forced bond. Seraphine continued, if the princes disappear first, he will be broken. He will cling to the nearest hand. Mine. The robed figure was silent for a moment. Then it said, there is still the cleaning woman. She is attached to the infants. She may become a complication. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Mara, she said, voice dripping contempt. A nobody. A stain on stone. The robed figure murmured, nobodies sometimes become heroes. Seraphine's laugh was short and cold. Not in my castle. Kale's gaze snapped back to the nursery mirror. Because while Seraphine plotted in darkness, Mara had returned, quietly, stubbornly, despite being threatened. Mara rocked all three princes again, whispering comfort into their tiny ears. You're safe, she murmured. Even if I have to fight monsters to keep you safe. Kale's breath caught. Because monsters were exactly what this world was full of. And Mara, human, fragile, underestimated, had just promised she would fight them anyway. Kale stared at her reflection. For the first time he saw the full danger of the situation. Seraphine had allies in shadows. She had plans in motion. She had influence in court. And she had no conscience. Meanwhile, Mara had nothing but courage, and old charms, and love. And yet, love was the one force Kale knew could defy the darkness. His queen had proven that. Kale's voice dropped into a vow, spoken to the mirrors like a verdict. Enough. The tower's shadows stirred, responding to him like obedient beasts. I have seen the truth, Kale whispered, eyes burning. Now I will decide what the truth costs. He turned toward the mirror showing Seraphine, still standing with the cloaked figure. Seraphine smiled as if she had already won. Kale's smile when it came was colder than death. Because Seraphine did not understand one thing. A vampire king could be patient. But once he chose to protect, he did not stop until the threat was ashes. Kale stepped closer to the central mirror again, back to the nursery. Mara's eyes lifted suddenly as if she felt his gaze like heat. She looked toward the corner of the room where shadows gathered deeper than they should. Her lips parted. Who's there? She whispered. Kale froze. She couldn't possibly see him. The warding spells were perfect. And yet, Mara's stare was too direct. Too accurate. Like she could sense the truth the way the mirrors did. Kale's heart, dead, ancient, stubborn, ached again. Because if Mara could sense him, then she might also sense what he truly was. And if she feared him, he would lose the only person in the castle who loved his sons. Kale remained still in shadow. Mara stared a moment longer, then lowered her gaze to the babies. She whispered, barely audible. Your father is closer than you think. Kale's eyes widened. A chill ran through him, not from fear of Seraphine. From fear of what Mara might be. Or what Mara might become. Because a cleaning woman shouldn't feel a king through wards. A human shouldn't recognize a vampire's presence like instinct. Unless Mara carried something deeper than poverty and tenderness. Unless Eloan's blood oath had changed her. Unless fate had marked her. Kale clenched his jaw. He had enough proof to destroy Seraphine. But now he needed answers about Mara. And he needed them quickly. Because Seraphine's trap was tightening. And the next move would not be a warning. Would be an attempt. The night Seraphine made her move. Snow fell like silent ash over Obsidian Castle. It clung to gargoyles and ledges, softened the edges of the world, and made the night feel too clean for the evil unfolding inside its walls. In the West Tower, King Kale Nightborn watched the mirrors without blinking. He had not moved for hours. Not because he didn't want to. Because he was holding himself back with the only chains that could restrain a vampire king, strategy, restraint, and the promise he had made at a tomb. The enchanted mirrors glowed crimson, each one capturing a different corner of the castle like a living heartbeat. Kale's blood ink ritual still stained his fingertips, but his anger stained him deeper. He had seen Seraphine's face when no one watched. He had heard her plan. And now, in the mirror that showed the eastern corridor, he saw something that made even immortality feel too slow. Seraphine was walking, quietly, purposefully, toward the nursery wing. Not in a gown. Not in silk. Not in the soft costume she wore for the court. She wore a dark cloak that blended with stone. Her hair was pinned back for movement. In her hand, she carried a small silver vial that caught torchlight like a shard of moon. Kale's entire body stiffened. The nursery. His sons. His queen's last living pieces. Kale's claws extended, then retracted as he forced calm back into his limbs. If he revealed himself now, Seraphine would scream that she was checking on the infants. She would cry innocence. She would make herself a victim. But Kale didn't need drama. He needed the kind of proof that could destroy her forever. He shifted his gaze to a second mirror, the one showing the servant's wing. Mara stepped from her tiny room, pulling her shawl tighter over her shoulders. She looked pale with fatigue, but she still carried a small basket, fresh linens, warm cloths, and a little pouch of herbs she likely paid for with her own meager wages. Mara walked faster than most servants moved at night, eyes scanning corridors like she expected danger. Kale's chest tightened. She didn't know Seraphine was coming. Or maybe she did. Maybe her instincts were sharper than anyone suspected. In the nursery mirror, the triplets were asleep in their cradles, the crystal star mobile turning slowly overhead. The braided protective cords hung above them like quiet guardians. Alden's tiny hand twitched in his sleep. Soren made a soft sound, a baby sigh. Riven's lips parted as if he dreamed of warmth. Kale's jaw clenched so hard it ached. Then the nursery door opened. Seraphine slipped inside. She moved like a shadow, silent, careful, predatory. She shut the door behind her and stood still for a moment, listening. The nursery was quiet. No crying. No witnesses. Perfect. Seraphine walked toward the cradles and looked down at the babies with an expression that wasn't rage. It was worse. It was calculation. 3, she whispered. Always 3. She removed the silver vial from her cloak and held it up to the lantern light. The liquid inside was clear, too innocent looking for what it probably was. Seraphine uncorked it. A faint mist rose, barely visible. Kale's fingers dug into the stone armrest. He recognized the scent even through the magic of the mirrors, an herbal sedative mixed with something older, something ritualistic. Not meant to soothe, meant to weaken. Seraphine leaned over Alden's cradle first. She dipped a tiny cloth into the vial and brought it toward the baby's lips. Kale's vision flashed red. One step. One heartbeat. He could appear there. He could tear her away. He could. A sound stopped him. Footsteps in the corridor. Quick. Light. Familiar. Mara. Seraphine froze, cloth hovering above Alden's face. Then she smiled. Because to Seraphine, Mara wasn't a threat. Mara was a convenient scapegoat. The door opened again and Mara stepped inside. She paused, startled, seeing Seraphine standing by the cradles at this hour. My lady? Mara's voice was cautious. Is something wrong? Seraphine turned slowly, holding the cloth behind her back like a hidden knife. Her voice softened instantly. Mara. How fortunate. I was just checking on the princes. They seemed restless earlier. Mara's eyes flicked to the cradles, then to Seraphine's hand. She didn't see the vial. But she sensed something. Mara set her basket down carefully. I can take over, my lady. You shouldn't trouble yourself at night. Seraphine's smile tightened. Trouble myself? Mara, I care. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. Besides, Kale entrusted me with their well-being during his absence. Mara swallowed. Even in the mirror, Kale could see her fighting her own fear. Of course, Mara said quietly. I only meant, the princes are delicate. They respond better to familiar hands. Seraphine's expression flickered, annoyance at the implication that Mara mattered more. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. You are becoming bold, Seraphine whispered. That's dangerous for a servant. Mara stiffened. I'm not bold, my lady. I'm careful. Seraphine's smile returned, sweet as poison. Then be careful now. She lifted her hand and revealed the cloth. Mara's eyes widened. What is that? Mara asked, unable to hide alarm. Seraphine tilted her head. A calming mixture. The princes have been fussy. I thought it would help them sleep longer. Mara took an involuntary step forward. No, my lady. Please. Not without the royal physician. Seraphine's eyes hardened. Are you questioning me? Mara's hands shook. I'm asking. Because baby's that young. Seraphine stepped in close enough that Mara had to tilt her head back. You forget who you are, Seraphine hissed. You scrub floors. You fold sheets. You do not give orders. Mara's voice broke slightly, but she didn't back down. I'm not ordering. I'm begging. Let me call the nursemaid. Let me. Seraphine's hand shot out and grabbed Mara's wrist. Not violently, controlled, precise, but firm enough to hurt. Mara gasped. Seraphine leaned closer, lips near Mara's ear. If the princes sleep, the whole castle will be grateful, she whispered. If they don't, and they keep crying, accidents happen. Slips. Falls. Sudden fevers. Mara went still. Her face drained of color. Kale's blood turned to ice. Seraphine's eyes gleamed as she released Mara's wrist. Now, step aside. Mara's gaze darted to the babies, 3 tiny lives, then back to Seraphine. In that moment, Mara did something Kale didn't expect. She didn't run. She didn't collapse. She didn't plead again. She straightened. Her shoulders squared like a soldier's. And she said, softly but clearly, "No." Seraphine blinked, genuinely surprised. Mara's voice trembled, but it didn't break. "You can threaten me. You can punish me. But you will not put that on them." Seraphine's face twisted, outrage and disbelief. "Do you know what I can do to you?" Seraphine whispered, voice sharpening. Mara swallowed, eyes shining with fear. "Yes." "And you still refuse me?" Mara lifted her chin. "Yes." Kale's dead heart lurched. Because he saw it now, Mara wasn't brave in a loud way. She was brave in the way that mattered. When no one would praise her, when no one would protect her, when the cost was real. Seraphine's anger simmered behind her smile. Then she stepped back and exhaled slowly, forcing calm. "Fine," she said sweetly. "If you insist on being heroic, Mara, then you may soothe them yourself." Mara's shoulders loosened a fraction. But Kale's instinct screamed. Because Seraphine didn't sound defeated. She sounded like she had changed tactics. Seraphine moved toward the door. "I'll leave you with them then." Her gaze slid toward Mara like a warning. "But remember, if anything happens to my future stepchildren while you're alone with them." Mara's eyes widened. Seraphine's smile deepened. "People will ask questions." And then she left. The door closed. Mara stood frozen, breathing shallowly. Then she rushed to the cradles, checking the babies desperately, touching their foreheads, their tiny hands, their blankets. "All right," she whispered, voice shaking. "All right, my sweet stars. I'm here." In the West Tower, Kale's body was rigid with fury. Seraphine had just created a trap. If anything happened to the triplets now, she would point to Mara. And Mara would have no defense. Unless Kale intervened. But if he revealed himself too soon, Seraphine might flee. She might destroy evidence. She might claim Kale had become unstable with grief. Kale stared at the mirror until the edges frosted. He needed a better plan. A decisive plan. One that ended Seraphine and protected Mara. Then the mirror showing the eastern parlor flickered. The cloaked figure returned. Seraphine entered the parlor moments later, moving fast. "What went wrong?" the cloaked figure rasped. Seraphine's eyes burned. The cleaning woman interrupted. "A servant?" The figure sounded surprised. Seraphine sneered. "She's always there. Like a stray animal guarding scraps. But it doesn't matter. We adjust." The cloaked figure's voice lowered. "Adjust how?" Seraphine smiled slowly. "If I can't weaken the princess tonight," she murmured, "then I weaken the king." Kale went cold. Seraphine stepped closer to the cloaked figure. "I want the binding charm prepared. A comfort spell. A grief lure. Something that makes him cling to me when he returns." The cloaked figure hesitated. "That is dangerous. Royal blood resists." Seraphine's eyes glittered. "Then we use what royal blood cannot resist." The figure's hood tilted. "Meaning?" Seraphine's voice became almost tender. "His children." Kale's jaw clenched. Seraphine continued, "If the triplets fall ill, even mildly, he will rush back. He will panic. And I will be there, the devoted lady who never left their side." The cloaked figure murmured, "And the cleaning woman?" Seraphine's smile widened. "She will take the blame for whatever mistake occurs. A wrong herb. A dirty cloth. A servant's carelessness." Kale's hands trembled. Mara was right. Seraphine was not just cruel. She was intelligent. A genius at turning kindness into weakness. Seraphine lifted the silver vial again. "Prepare the second mixture," she said. "Something slower. Something that looks natural." The cloaked figure's voice lowered. "If this is traced." "It won't be," Seraphine snapped. "Because no one looks at servants. No one listens to a cleaning woman." Kale stared at the mirror, fury rising like a storm. Seraphine was wrong about one thing. Kale was listening. And now Kale was done waiting. He shifted to another mirror, the servants' corridor near the nursery. Mara had not left the babies. She paced gently with Riven in her arms, humming Eloan's lullaby under her breath, trying to soothe her own fear as much as the child's. Her eyes kept darting to the door. As if she expected it to open again. As if she expected the monster to return. Then Mara stopped suddenly. Her whole body went still. She stared at the shadows near the nursery window. "Your Majesty?" she whispered. Kale froze. No one had told Mara the king was alive inside the castle. No one had told her about the Vigil of Shadows. No one. Mara's voice shook. I don't know how I know, but you're here. Kale's breath caught. Mara swallowed hard, eyes filling. If you're watching, please, don't leave them alone with her. Kale's chest tightened with something that wasn't rage. It was guilt. Because he had left them alone. He had hidden. He had tested. And while he tested, Seraphine moved closer to killing the only things Kale still loved. Mara's shoulders trembled as she whispered, I can't protect them from everything. I'm only human. Only human. Kale stared at her face in the mirror. Only human, and yet she stood between vampire politics and 3 royal infants like she had steel under her skin. Kale rose from the chair, shadows curling around him like a cloak made of night itself. The tower's runes flared. The mirrors hummed louder. And then Kale did something he hadn't done since Aloan died. He chose a person. He chose to trust. He pressed his palm to the mirror, right where Mara stood in the nursery, sending a thin ripple of power through the glass. In the nursery, Mara gasped, clutching Riven closer. A soft, cold breeze moved through the room as if the castle exhaled. And then Mara heard a voice, not loud, not threatening, deep and calm like midnight. I am here, Kale's voice murmured through the spell. Mara froze, eyes wide. Kale's voice continued, quieter. You were right to refuse her. Mara's lips parted. Your Majesty. Kale's voice carried a controlled storm. Listen to me, Mara Loran. Tonight you will not be alone again. Do you understand? Mara's breath trembled. Yes. Kale's voice softened, only slightly. And you will not be blamed. Mara's eyes filled with tears, relief and fear tangling together. Thank you, she whispered. Kale paused, as if the next words were harder than any threat he could deliver. Tell me, he said quietly, why do you know my queen's lullaby? Mara swallowed, gaze dropping. She asked me to promise, Mara whispered. On the night she died. Kale's throat tightened. What promise? Mara's voice broke. To love them. To protect them. To remember her for them when grief made you silent. The word struck Kale like a blade. He had failed that part. He had loved his sons, yes. He had protected them, yes. But he had been silent, too silent, about Aloan. He had turned her memory into pain he refused to touch. And Mara had carried Aloan's voice in secret, hiding it inside lullabies and whispered stories. Kale's voice lowered. I will come to the nursery. Mara's eyes widened in shock. No, my king, if she sees. Kale's voice turned cold. Let her see. Mara trembled. She'll twist it, she'll lie. Kale's voice cut through like iron. I have mirrors full of truth. And tonight, I will stop pretending to be absent. Mara's grip tightened on Riven. Will you punish her? Kale's pause was terrifyingly calm. I will end her influence, he said. And I will do it in a way the council cannot undo. Mara swallowed, voice small. Be careful, your majesty. She has help. Someone in a hood. I saw her once. Kale's eyes narrowed. I know. Mara's face went pale. Then. Kale's voice softened again, just a fraction. Then you were even braver than you realized. Mara's eyes shimmered and she whispered, I was just doing what your queen would have done. Kale's chest tightened painfully. Because that was exactly why the castle itself seemed to favor Mara. Because the echoes of Aloan's kindness lived inside her. Kale withdrew his hand from the mirror. The connection faded. In the nursery, Mara stood trembling, holding Riven, listening to the silence that followed as if the walls themselves had spoken. And in the west tower, Kale stepped into the shadows, his body dissolving into darkness like smoke. He moved through the castle unseen, through hidden corridors, through ancient passageways only the royal bloodline could open. He did not go to the Great Hall. He did not go to the council. He went where the truth lived. He went to the nursery. Because tonight, Seraphine would make another move. And this time, the king would be there. In the nursery, Mara sensed the air change again, heavier, colder, alive. The shadows near the window deepened. Then the darkness unfolded like a cloak being drawn aside. And King Kale Nightborn appeared. Not in a crown. Not in royal ceremony. In black, simple clothing, his hair loose, his eyes glowing faintly like embers under ice. He looked tired. Grief was still carved into his face. But something else was there too. Resolve. Mara's knees almost buckled. She bowed quickly, but Kale raised a hand. Don't, he said quietly. Mara froze, confused. Kale's gaze went to the cradles. He stepped closer, staring down at his sons like he had not allowed himself to do fully in months. Alden slept, tiny chest rising and falling. Soren stirred, making a soft sound. Riven blinked up at the king from Mara's arms, then yawned. Kale reached out slowly, touching Riven's tiny hand with one finger. Riven grabbed him. Kale went still. A long silence filled the nursery. Mara whispered, "They know you." Kale's voice was rough. "They should. I should have been here more." Mara swallowed. "You were grieving." Kale's eyes flicked to her. "So were you." Mara looked down, guilt flashing in her expression. Kale's voice lowered. "You carried her memory for them." Mara's eyes filled. "I tried." Kale stepped closer, close enough that Mara could feel his cold aura like night air. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. Mara's voice trembled. "Because you were a king. And I was nothing. And grief made you dangerous to approach." Kale's jaw tightened as if the truth hurt. He looked away toward the door. "Seraphine will come back," Kale said calmly. "And when she does, she will find the king she thought was away." Mara's breath caught. "What if she attacks you?" Kale's lips curved in a humorless smile. "She won't." Mara frowned. "How can you be sure?" Kale's gaze turned cold as the crypt. "Because she is not brave. She is ambitious." He looked back at Mara. "But you," he said quietly, "are brave." Mara flinched as if praise felt unfamiliar. Kale's voice softened almost unwillingly. "Stay close to them. Do not leave the nursery." Mara nodded. Kale moved to the shadowed corner by the door, where he could be seen if he chose and unseen if he needed. Then the hallway outside filled with footsteps again. The nursery door handle turned. And Seraphine returned. She stepped inside with practiced sweetness already forming on her lips. Then she saw Kale. Her face froze. For one heartbeat, her mask slipped entirely, and terror flashed across her eyes. Then the mask snapped back into place. "My king." Seraphine gasped, feigning shock. You're back early?" Kale's voice was calm. "No," he said. "I never left." Seraphine's smile trembled. Mara's breath caught. Kale stepped forward slightly, eyes glowing. "I watched," he said softly. Seraphine's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Watched what?" Kale's gaze flicked to her cloak. "Your concern. Your devotion. Your midnight visits." Seraphine forced a laugh, brittle. "My king, I was only—" Kale cut her off with a single sentence that made the room feel smaller. "Show me what's in your hand." Seraphine froze. Her fingers tightened around the vial hidden in her cloak. For the first time, true panic cracked her expression. Kale's voice stayed even. "Now." Seraphine's eyes darted to Mara, calculating. Then she smiled suddenly, sharp and desperate. "My king, this is madness," she said quickly. "That servant, she has been alone with the princess for hours. She could have." Kale's voice turned lethal. "Enough." Seraphine flinched. Kale stepped closer, and the shadows in the room shifted like living things responding to him. "I have 7 mirrors of truth," Kale said softly. "And in those mirrors I saw who you are." Seraphine's lips parted, but no sound came. Kale's gaze hardened. "Put the vial down." Seraphine's hand trembled. Slowly, very slowly, she brought it out and set it on the nearby table. Kale didn't touch it yet. He looked at her instead. "Leave," he said. Seraphine blinked. "Leave?" Kale's voice sharpened. "You are relieved of all authority. You will not step into the nursery again. You will not speak to my sons again. You will not speak to Mara again." Seraphine's face tightened, fury rising beneath fear. "You can't do this without the council." Kale's eyes burned. "Watch me." Seraphine's nostrils flared. "Kale, you're grieving. You're paranoid. You're—" Kale stepped forward, and the air went cold enough that Mara shivered. "I am the king," Kale said quietly. "And you are nothing in my castle now." Seraphine's eyes glistened. Whether from rage or calculation Mara couldn't tell. Then Seraphine turned and walked toward the door with stiff pride. But before she left, she looked back at Mara. And her smile returned, thin, venomous, promising. "This isn't over," Seraphine whispered. Kale's voice cut through the threat like a blade. Kale's eyes hardened. "Yes." Mara's voice shook with anger now. "How could she?" Kale cut in quietly. "Ambition does not have a heart." Mara stared at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. Kale's gaze flicked to her tears, something unreadable passing over his face. Then he lifted a hand, and stopped himself as if unsure whether touching her would be too much. Mara whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cry." Kale's voice was rough. "Don't apologize for being human." Mara looked at him, stunned. And in that moment, Standing in a nursery lit by lanterns, surrounded by sleeping princes and old charms, Mara realized something terrifying. The king was not as cold as the world believed. He was not a monster. He was a grieving father who had been forced to become stone. And tonight, Mara had cracked that stone. Cale's gaze shifted to the shadowed corridor beyond the nursery. Part 3 ends here, he murmured, almost like he was speaking to the castle itself. But his next words were for Mara. This was only her first move. Mara swallowed. Then what's next? Cale's eyes glowed faintly, and the shadows around him stirred like ready blades. Next, he said calmly, I stop playing defense. The trial in the Great Hall. Morning arrived with the kind of cold that made even torches look tired. Snow lay thick on the castle rooftops, and the stained glass windows turned the weak daylight into bruised colors across the stone floors. Obsidian Castle looked peaceful, almost holy, if you ignored the fact that betrayal was moving through its halls like a second wind. In the nursery wing, Mara stood beside the cradles, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. The triplets slept again, finally, soft breaths rising and falling in rhythm, as if the night's danger had been nothing more than a bad dream. But Mara knew better. The danger wasn't gone. It had only changed shape. Behind her, King Cale Nightborn remained still, too still. He stood near the window, shadows pooling at his feet as if they were loyal creatures waiting for command. He looked calm from a distance, but Mara had seen the way his jaw tightened when he held that vial, the way his eyes went cold when Seraphine threatened her. A king could be silent and still be a storm. Mara's voice came out small. She'll tell everyone I tried to poison them. Cale didn't turn. She will try. Mara swallowed hard. And people will believe her. Cale's gaze flicked to her then, sharp and heavy. They won't. Mara tried to believe that, but her stomach twisted with fear. The truth didn't always win first. In a castle like this, reputation was a weapon, and Mara had lived her whole life without armor. Servants already whispered about her. About how she hovered over royal infants. About how she acted above her place. About how the king had spoken to her last night, if anyone had even caught a glimpse. And Seraphine, beautiful, noble, adored, had an entire court trained to see her as the rightful future queen. Mara looked down at the sleeping princes and whispered, I don't care what happens to me, as long as they're safe. Cale's voice softened just enough to feel real. I know. Mara blinked, surprised. He sounded like he meant it. Cale moved closer to the cradles. He didn't touch the babies this time. He only stood over them like a guardian statue, eyes unreadable. Then he said quietly, this castle has a sickness. It isn't magic. It isn't war. It's pride. Mara's throat tightened. Pride? Cale's gaze darkened. The belief that some lives matter more than others. Mara lowered her eyes because she understood that kind of sickness too well. Cale turned toward the door. Today I cure it. Before Mara could respond, the distant sound of horns echoed through the castle, a formal signal. The kind used when a council session was called unexpectedly. Mara's heart stuttered. Cale didn't look surprised at all. She's faster than I hoped, he murmured. But predictable. Mara whispered, what do we do? Cale's eyes lifted, glowing faintly. We stop hiding. He stepped into the hallway and gestured once, just once. Shadows slipped forward along the corridor like silent guards, sealing the nursery wing with invisible wards. Mara felt the air change like a barrier had formed. Cale looked back at her. You stay with them. Mara shook her head, panic rising. No, if she accuses me in front of the council. Cale's voice cut cleanly. If you appear, she'll turn your fear into proof. She'll call your tears guilt. Mara flinched. Cale continued, controlled but firm. I will speak for you. Mara's lips parted. Why? Cale paused. For a heartbeat, his face softened, just enough to reveal the truth beneath his crown. Because no one spoke for my queen the night she died, he said quietly. Everyone watched. Everyone whispered. And she bled anyway. Mara's eyes filled. Your Majesty. Cale's gaze turned back to stone. Stay. That is an order. Mara nodded, trembling. Yes, my king. Cale left. And the nursery wing fell into a tense silence broken only by the soft breathing of 3 sleeping princes that in the great hall. The council assembled quickly. The room was enormous, vaulted ceiling, iron chandeliers, banners of the Nightborn line hanging like dark wings. At the far end sat the throne, carved from black stone and edged with silver runes. The advisors and nobles stood in clusters, murmuring like a swarm. At the center, Lady Seraphine Vailmont stood as if she belonged there more than anyone. She wore morning black velvet today, her hair pinned back in a simple style that made her look modest, wounded, sincere. A performance crafted to perfection. Beside her stood Lady Cordelia Ashwin, looking concerned. Nearby, Councillor Varric Thorn frowned, hands clasped behind his back. Whispers rose. Why was the council called? I heard something happened in the nursery. Is it true the princes were in danger? The king is away, how can we decide anything? Then the great doors opened. And the entire hall fell silent. Because King Cale Nightborn walked in. Alive. Present. Unshaken. A ripple of shock rolled through the room like wind through graves. Some nobles bowed instantly. Others stared as if they'd seen a ghost. Seraphine's face flickered, one heartbeat of pure alarm, then she forced her expression into relief. My king, she gasped, stepping forward like a devoted lover who feared for him. You returned, thank the heavens? Cale raised one hand. Seraphine stopped mid-step as if the air itself had halted her. Cale's voice was calm, but it filled the room like thunder. I did not return. Whispers exploded again. What does he mean? Where has he been? Is this some? Cale walked toward the throne slowly. He did not sit yet. He looked at Seraphine with cold clarity. I never left. Seraphine's smile trembled. My king. I don't understand. You understand perfectly, Cale replied. He turned to the council. You were told I traveled north. You were told Lady Vailmont held authority in my absence. That was the story. Varric frowned deeply. Your Majesty, why would you? Cale's gaze swept the room. Because a king who has lost his queen must be careful about who stands near his heirs. Seraphine's lips parted. Cale, that's unfair. Cale's eyes sharpened. Silence. Seraphine flinched, shocked by the command. Cale finally sat on the throne, posture perfect, voice controlled. Lady Seraphine Vailmont has called this council because she wants to accuse a servant of wrongdoing. Seraphine recovered quickly, lifting her chin with sorrowful dignity. Yes. Her voice turned soft. My lords, last night I found the cleaning woman, Mara, alone with the princes at an unusual hour. The infants were restless. I attempted to help, but she interfered. She behaved possessively. A few nobles exchanged looks. Seraphine continued, voice trembling with concern. And this morning I discovered a vial near the nursery, an herbal mixture. I fear the princes may have been exposed to something unsafe. Murmurs flared. A servant poisoning royal heirs? That's treason. Who is this Mara? Seraphine turned toward the advisors dramatically. I wanted to handle it quietly. But the princes are the realm's future. We must act. Cale watched her without expression. When she finished, Cale said only one sentence. Bring the vial. A guard stepped forward and placed the small silver vial on a table before the throne. Seraphine looked pleased, because she believed she had steered the room exactly where she wanted it. Cale picked up the vial, examined it briefly, then set it down. He looked at Seraphine. You claim you found this near the nursery. Yes, Seraphine said smoothly. Cale's gaze narrowed. And you claim you fear the cleaning woman used it on my sons. Seraphine's eyes softened with practiced sadness. I don't want to believe it, but yes. Cale leaned back slightly. Then you will not mind if I show the council what truly happened. The great hall went still. Seraphine's smile stiffened. Show them how. Cale lifted his hand. And the air changed. The torches dimmed for a heartbeat as ancient magic awakened. A circle of shadow formed in the center of the hall, rising like smoke, then solidifying into a tall, oval mirror, black glass edged with crimson runes. Gasps erupted. Varric stepped back. Your Majesty, the vigil mirrors, those are forbidden outside the tower. Cale's voice was ice. They are forbidden to liars. Seraphine's face drained slightly, but she forced a laugh. Cale, this is unnecessary. We can handle this privately. Cale didn't look at her. He addressed the council. You will see the truth. And then you will decide whether Lady Vailmont is fit to stand in this castle. The mirror flared crimson. The glass rippled. And the scene appeared, last night, the nursery. The council watched Seraphine slip into the room in a dark cloak. They watched her uncork the vial. They watched her soak a cloth. They watched her lean over the first cradle. A few nobles inhaled sharply. Seraphine's voice in the memory floated through the hall, cold and low. 3, always 3. The mirror showed Mara entering, surprised, cautious, then stepping between Seraphine and the cradles. The council saw Mara's fear. They saw her refusal. They saw Seraphine grab Mara's wrist. They saw Seraphine whisper a threat near Mara's ear. Then the mirror shifted to the eastern parlor, Seraphine meeting a cloaked figure, discussing plans, speaking of monasteries and forgetting. The great hall erupted. You plotted against the heirs. That's treason. She tried to frame a servant. Who is that hooded advisor? Seraphine stumbled back, furious. This is manipulated. Magic can. Kale's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Truth mirrors cannot be manipulated. Seraphine's eyes burned with desperation. Kale, you're grieving. You're paranoid. Kale stood. The hall quieted instantly. His gaze locked on Seraphine. You threatened my sons. You plotted their removal. You attempted to drug them. Then you tried to place blame on the one woman who protected them. Seraphine's face twisted into rage. She is a servant. She has no place near royalty. The words snapped something in the room. Because the nobles heard it clearly now. Not concern. Contempt. Pride. The sickness Kale had spoken of. Kale's voice was deadly calm. You just revealed the true reason you hate her. Seraphine's breathing turned sharp. She's nothing. Kale's eyes glowed. Then why are you afraid of her? Seraphine froze. Kale turned to the council. Counselor Varric. Varric stepped forward stiffly. Yes, your majesty. Kale gestured toward the mirror. Did you witness treason? Varric hesitated, politics fighting truth, then he bowed his head. Yes. Kale's voice was cold. Then by law, Lady Seraphine Valemont is stripped of title and protection within this castle. She will be confined under guard until judgment is passed. Seraphine's eyes widened. You can't. My family, my allies. Kale's voice turned darker. Your family can plead with the crows. Guards stepped toward her. Seraphine backed away, voice rising. Kale, listen to me, she is not what she seems. Kale's eyes narrowed. Explain. Seraphine pointed toward the mirror, shaking. She speaks the old tongue. She carries protective charms. She knows the queen's lullaby. She's using witchcraft, and you're too blinded by grief to see it. The room murmured again, fear, superstition, class prejudice. Kale's face didn't change. But his next words did. They're right, he said to the council. Silence slammed down. Seraphine blinked, stunned. Kale continued, voice steady. Mara does speak the old tongue. Varric frowned. Your Majesty. Kale's gaze sharpened. Because my queen taught it to her. Seraphine's face contorted. Lies. Kale lifted one hand. Bring Mara. The entire hall shifted, startled. Seraphine's eyes lit with cruel satisfaction. Yes, bring her. Let them see. Guards moved, but Kale raised a hand again, stopping them. Not in chains. His gaze swept the nobles. If any man dares shackle a woman who saved my heirs, he will answer to me. A tense silence followed. Minutes later, the great doors opened again. And Mara entered. She wore the same simple blue dress. Her hands were raw from work. Her posture was small, but she forced herself to stand straight. Her eyes were wide, afraid, humiliated, out of place among velvet and crowns. She looked exactly like what Seraphine wanted her to look like. Easy to crush. But Mara walked forward anyway. Because somewhere in the nursery wing, 3 babies needed her to be brave. Kale watched her approach, something unreadable in his expression. Mara stopped several steps from the throne and bowed deeply. Your Majesty. Her voice shook. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Seraphine laughed harshly. How noble. The servant plays innocent. Kale's gaze snapped to Seraphine. One glance and she went quiet. Kale looked back at Mara. Mara Loran. Did you attempt to harm my sons? Mara's eyes widened. No. Kale's voice softened just slightly. Did you refuse Lady Valemont last night? Mara swallowed. Yes. Kale's eyes narrowed. Why? Mara's voice trembled, but it was honest. Because what she had wasn't medicine. It wasn't safe. And because the princes deserve kindness, not experiments. A few nobles shifted uncomfortably at that word. Kale leaned forward. Tell the council why you were near the nursery at night. Mara hesitated. Seraphine's smile sharpened. Go on. Tell them. Mara's hands clenched. She looked down, then up again, eyes shining. Because Queen Eloan asked me to promise, Mara said quietly. The hall fell still. Mara's voice cracked. She asked me, on the night she died, to love them. To protect them. To remember her for them. Seraphine scoffed. Convenient. Kale's voice turned cold. Show them. Mara blinked. Show them what? Kale nodded once. Mara swallowed and slowly lifted her right wrist. The room inhaled. Because on Mara's skin, faint but unmistakable, was the shape of a handprint, as if pressed there long ago in blood and vow. Not a bruise. Not dirt. A mark. An oath. Varric stepped forward, eyes narrowed. That is a queen's blood oath seal. Mara's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted it. I never asked for it. She grabbed me and she was dying, and she begged me and I said yes. Kale's throat tightened. Seraphine's face twisted into rage. That mark proves she used old magic. That makes her dangerous. Kale's voice cut through. No. That mark proves my queen trusted her. Murmurs rippled, some sympathetic, some fearful. Kale stood again, voice carrying authority. You will all listen carefully. He looked at the nobles. My sons are alive today because a cleaning woman refused to obey a noble's cruelty. He looked at the advisors. My queen's memory lives in this castle because a servant refused to let grief erase her. Then Kale's gaze hardened, sweeping the entire hall. And if any of you believe bloodlines make someone worthy of respect, you have forgotten what a kingdom is built on. The room went silent in a way that felt like shame. Seraphine shook her head wildly, panic breaking through. Kale, you're making a fool of yourself. A king defending a cleaning girl. Kale's eyes flashed. A king defending truth. Then Kale turned to the mirror again. The scene shifted, showing Seraphine meeting the cloaked figure. Kale's voice lowered. Now we address your help. The council murmured anxiously. Kale lifted his hand, and the shadows near the hall's pillars moved. They coiled, then struck, not at anyone in the room but toward the side doors. A scream sounded from the corridor. Guards dragged in a cloaked figure struggling violently, hood falling back to reveal a pale face etched with forbidden runes. A blood mage. Banished by old law. Seraphine's face went white. The mage hissed, You promised protection. Seraphine snapped, Silence. Kale's voice was ice. So, you did have help. Seraphine's eyes darted wildly. Then she did the only thing left to a cornered snake. She lunged for Mara. Not to strike her. To grab her. To use her as a shield. Mara gasped as Seraphine's hands clutched her arm. The hall erupted. Guards moved, but Kale moved faster. The shadows surged between them like a wall. Seraphine stumbled back as if she'd hit stone. Kale's eyes glowed like winter stars. Do not touch her. Seraphine's voice broke. You care about her. That's why you're doing this. Kale's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. He simply said, Remove her. Guards seized Seraphine, dragging her away as she screamed threats and promises and venom. This kingdom will regret humiliating me. You'll beg for me when rivals come. She's cursed, she'll ruin you. Kale didn't react. Because kings didn't argue with storms. They outlasted them. When Seraphine was gone, silence returned, thick and heavy. Mara stood trembling, arm aching where Seraphine grabbed her. Her face was pale. Tears clung to her lashes, but she didn't let them fall. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke, not to the council but to Mara. You did not deserve that. Mara whispered, I'm fine. Kale's voice was softer, and somehow that softness felt more powerful than any roar. No. You are not. Mara's throat tightened. Kale turned to the council. This session is over. Varric hesitated. Your Majesty, what will you do with the blood mage? Kale's gaze turned cold again. We will learn who sent him. Who funded him. And how deep this rot goes. A chill moved through the advisors. Kale's voice lowered into a warning. Because Seraphine was not the beginning. Mara's breath caught. Kale stepped down from the throne and walked toward her. The hall watched, stunned, as a vampire king approached a cleaning woman without disgust, without distance. Mara tried to bow again, but Kale lifted a hand. Not here, he said quietly. Not for them. Mara blinked. My king? Kale's gaze softened as he looked at her wrist, the queen's oath mark. You carried her last request, he said. And you carried my sons when no one else would. Mara's voice broke. I only did what was right. Kale nodded slowly. That is rarer than royal blood. Mara's eyes filled and this time the tears fell. Kale hesitated. Then gently, carefully, he reached out and wiped one tear from her cheek with the back of his finger, as if the action itself was sacred. The hall went so silent it felt like the castle stopped breathing. Mara froze shocked. Kale's voice was low only for her. Come. Mara whispered, Where? Kale's eyes darkened with resolve. To the nursery. And then, to safety. Mara swallowed. Seraphine won't stop. Cale's jaw tightened. No. She won't. His gaze drifted toward the doors where Seraphine had been dragged away. And his next words were a promise. Quiet, lethal, absolute. Which is why I will end this before she touches my family again. Mara's breath shook at one word. Family. Because Cale didn't just mean the triplets. Not anymore. The queen the castle recognized. The moment Seraphine was dragged from the great hall, Obsidian Castle looked calm again, like it could pretend nothing had happened. But the castle had lived too long to believe in calm. In the nursery wing, the lanterns still burned low, and the air still smelled faintly of warm milk and winter herbs. Mara stood near the cradles, watching the triplets sleep as if staring hard enough could keep danger away. Her wrist still ached where Seraphine had grabbed her, and her cheeks still felt hot from the shock of the king's touch. One gentle tear wiped away like it mattered. Across the room, King Cale Nightborn faced the window, his shoulders rigid, his gaze fixed on the snowfall outside. He looked like a statue carved from night itself. But Mara had heard his voice in the mirrors. She had seen the guilt behind his silence. And she had felt it, when he called them family. Mara swallowed hard. Your Majesty, she won't stop. Cale didn't turn at first. No, he said quietly. She won't. His voice wasn't afraid. It was certain, like someone acknowledging a storm by name. Cale finally looked back at Mara. The lantern light caught his eyes, faintly glowing like embers beneath ice. That's why we end this tonight. Mara's breath caught. Tonight. Cale moved closer to the cradles, lowering his voice as if the babies might understand. Seraphine has allies beyond this castle. If she reaches them, she becomes a political war. A stain the council will argue over for years. Mara whispered, and in those years, your sons would never be safe. Cale's gaze sharpened. Exactly. Mara's hands trembled. What do you need me to do? Cale held her gaze for a long moment, like the answer mattered more than strategy. Then he said, you stay close to them. And you stay close to me. Mara blinked, startled by the simplicity of it. Cale's voice lowered. No more invisibility. No more being left unguarded. Mara's throat tightened. People will hate me for that. Cale's expression didn't change, but his tone did, soft, dangerous. Then they will learn to hate quietly. Mara almost laughed from nerves, but it came out as a shaky breath. My king. I don't want power. Cale's gaze dropped briefly to her wrist, the queen's oath mark. Power finds people who don't want it, he murmured. That's why it can be trusted in their hands. Mara didn't know how to respond to that. She only knew she felt seen in a way she'd never felt before, like the castle had finally admitted she existed. A soft whimper rose from one cradle. Alden stirred. Mara moved automatically, adjusting his blanket, whispering, Shoo, it's okay. Cale watched her do it and something flickered across his face. Pain, gratitude, memory. Then Cale spoke, barely above a whisper. Eloan would have loved you. Mara froze. The words hit her like a wave. Mara swallowed, eyes stinging. She did love me in her way. She treated me like a person. Cale's voice roughened. And I didn't. Mara turned to him slowly. Your Majesty. Cale's jaw tightened as if admitting weakness cost him blood. I let grief make me cruel in ways I didn't intend. Not to you directly, but to everything human. To softness. To connection. Mara's voice trembled. You lost her. Cale's gaze darkened. And I almost lost them. His eyes flicked to the cradles. Because I hid. Mara stepped closer without thinking. Close enough to feel the cold of him like winter air held in skin. You didn't hide because you didn't care, she whispered. You hid because caring hurts. Cale stared at her. For a heartbeat, the vampire king looked less like a ruler, and more like a man drowning quietly. Then far down the corridor a bell rang. What? Twice. 3 times. Not a servant bell. Not a council bell. A security alarm, old and rarely used. Cale's posture shifted instantly. The room turned colder. Mara's heart stuttered. What is that? Cale's voice dropped into steel. The prison wing. Mara's face went pale. She escaped. Cale didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because at that exact moment the lantern flame flickered, once sharply, like someone had breathed on it. Then the protective cords above the cradles trembled. Mara's eyes widened. The charms? Cale moved between Mara and the babies without hesitation. Shadows coiled at his feet, ready. A whisper slid through the room like smoke. Not Mara's voice. Not Cale's. A third voice, thin, hissing, delighted. Your Majesty. Mara's blood went cold. Kale's eyes flashed. Blood mage. The nursery door creaked open by itself. And a figure stepped in, hood up, runes faintly glowing along his neck like ink that had come alive. His smile was wrong, too pleased, too calm. Behind him, held by the wrist like a trophy, was Seraphine. Her gown was torn slightly from struggling. Her hair was messy. But her eyes were burning with triumphant fury. Mara instinctively stepped back, but Kale's arm lifted, shielding her. Seraphine's voice was sweet, trembling with fake pain. Kale, you humiliated me in front of the kingdom. Kale's expression didn't move. You did that to yourself. Seraphine's smile broke into something sharper. You chose a cleaning girl over me. Kale's eyes hardened. I chose my sons. Seraphine's gaze slid toward the cradles, toward the sleeping babies, hungry and cold. Then you will choose again. The blood mage raised his hand slightly. The runes on his skin pulsed. The air thickened like pressure before lightning. Mara's chest tightened. She could barely breathe. Kale's shadows surged, forming a barrier around the cradles. Seraphine's voice lowered. You think you can protect them with darkness? Her smile widened. Darkness is where I learned to survive. Kale's voice was deadly calm. You learned wrong. The blood mage spoke, voice oily. Your Majesty, I suggest cooperation. Give Lady Valemont safe passage beyond your lands, and the princes remain untouched. Mara's hands shook. Don't bargain with them. Kale didn't even glance back at her. I'm not bargaining, he said quietly. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Then you're sacrificing them. Kale's gaze locked on Seraphine. No. I'm ending this. The blood mage's fingers twitched. A thin ripple of crimson magic pulsed forward, aimed not at Kale but at the cradles. Mara gasped. The protective cords flared faintly, silver, black, red, struggling against the pressure like shields under siege. Kale's shadows collided with the spell, absorbing it, but even Kale's power shuddered under the mage's forbidden runes. Seraphine's eyes gleamed. You can't defend 3 babies forever, she whispered. Kale's jaw tightened. And in that moment, because fear makes people reveal their true heart, Kale did something the council would never expect from a vampire king. He spoke softly, not to Seraphine. To Mara. Mara, he said, voice steady. Sing. Mara blinked, confused and terrified. What? Kale's eyes didn't leave the threat. Eloan's lullaby, he said. Now. Seraphine laughed. A song? That's your defense. The blood mage smirked, preparing another strike. Mara's throat tightened with panic, but she obeyed, because something in Kale's voice wasn't a request. It was trust. The queen the castle recognized. The moment Seraphine was dragged from the great hall, Obsidian Castle looked calm again, like it could pretend nothing had happened. But the castle had lived too long to believe in calm. In the nursery wing, the lanterns still burned low, and the air still smelled faintly of warm milk and winter herbs. Mara stood near the cradles, watching the triplets sleep as if staring hard enough could keep danger away. Her wrist still ached where Seraphine had grabbed her, and her cheeks still felt hot from the shock of the king's touch. One gentle tear wiped away like it mattered. Across the room, King Kale Nightborn faced the window, his shoulders rigid, his gaze fixed on the snowfall outside. He looked like a statue carved from night itself. But Mara had heard his voice in the mirrors. She had seen the guilt behind his silence. And she had felt it, when he called them family. Mara swallowed hard. Your Majesty, she won't stop. Kale didn't turn at first. No, he said quietly. She won't. His voice wasn't afraid. It was certain, like someone acknowledging a storm by name. Kale finally looked back at Mara. The lantern light caught his eyes, faintly glowing like embers beneath ice. That's why we end this tonight. Mara's breath caught. Tonight. Kale moved closer to the cradles, lowering his voice as if the babies might understand. Seraphine has allies beyond this castle. If she reaches them, she becomes a political war. A stain the council will argue over for years. Mara whispered, and in those years, your sons would never be safe. Kale's gaze sharpened. Exactly. Mara's hands trembled. What do you need me to do? Kale held her gaze for a long moment, like the answer mattered more than strategy. Then he said, you stay close to them. And you stay close to me. Mara blinked, startled by the simplicity of it. Kale's voice lowered. No more invisibility. No more being left unguarded. Mara's throat tightened. People will hate me for that. Kale's expression didn't change, but his tone did, soft, dangerous. Then they will learn to hate quietly. Mara almost laughed from nerves, but it came out as a shaky breath. My king. I don't want power. Kale's gaze dropped briefly to her wrist, the queen's oath mark. Power finds people who don't want it, he murmured. That's why it can be trusted in their hands. Mara didn't know how to respond to that. She only knew she felt seen in a way she'd never felt before, like the castle had finally admitted she existed. A soft whimper rose from one cradle. Alden stirred. Mara moved automatically, adjusting his blanket, whispering, "Shoo, it's okay." Kale watched her do it and something flickered across his face. Pain, gratitude, memory. Then Kale spoke, barely above a whisper. "Eloan would have loved you." Mara froze. The words hit her like a wave. Mara swallowed, eyes stinging. She did love me in her way. She treated me like a person. Kale's voice roughened. And I didn't. Mara turned to him slowly. Your Majesty. Kale's jaw tightened as if admitting weakness cost him blood. I let grief make me cruel in ways I didn't intend. Not to you directly, but to everything human. To softness. To connection. Mara's voice trembled. You lost her. Kale's gaze darkened. And I almost lost them. His eyes flicked to the cradles. Because I hid. Mara stepped closer without thinking. Close enough to feel the cold of him like winter air held in skin. You didn't hide because you didn't care, she whispered. You hid because caring hurts. Kale stared at her. For a heartbeat, the vampire king looked less like a ruler, and more like a man drowning quietly. Then far down the corridor a bell rang. What? Twice. 3 times. Not a servant bell. Not a council bell. A security alarm, old and rarely used. Kale's posture shifted instantly. The room turned colder. Mara's heart stuttered. What is that? Kale's voice dropped into steel. The prison wing. Mara's face went pale. She escaped. Kale didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because at that exact moment the lantern flame flickered, once sharply, like someone had breathed on it. Then the protective cords above the cradles trembled. Mara's eyes widened. The charms? Kale moved between Mara and the babies without hesitation. Shadows coiled at his feet, ready. A whisper slid through the room like smoke. Not Mara's voice. Not Kale's. A third voice, thin, hissing, delighted. Your Majesty. Mara's blood went cold. Kale's eyes flashed. Blood mage. The nursery door creaked open by itself. And a figure stepped in, hood up, runes faintly glowing along his neck like ink that had come alive. His smile was wrong, too pleased, too calm. Behind him, held by the wrist like a trophy, was Seraphine. Her gown was torn slightly from struggling. Her hair was messy. But her eyes were burning with triumphant fury. Mara instinctively stepped back, but Kale's arm lifted, shielding her. Seraphine's voice was sweet, trembling with fake pain. Kale, you humiliated me in front of the kingdom. Kale's expression didn't move. You did that to yourself. Seraphine's smile broke into something sharper. You chose a cleaning girl over me. Kale's eyes hardened. I chose my sons. Seraphine's gaze slid toward the cradles, toward the sleeping babies, hungry and cold. Then you will choose again. The blood mage raised his hand slightly. The runes on his skin pulsed. The air thickened like pressure before lightning. Mara's chest tightened. She could barely breathe. Kale's shadow surged, forming a barrier around the cradles. Seraphine's voice lowered. You think you can protect them with darkness? Her smile widened. Darkness is where I learned to survive. Kale's voice was deadly calm. You learned wrong. The blood mage spoke, voice oily. Your Majesty, I suggest cooperation. Give Lady Valemont safe passage beyond your lands, and the princes remain untouched. Mara's hands shook. Don't bargain with them. Kale didn't even glance back at her. I'm not bargaining, he said quietly. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Then you're sacrificing them. Kale's gaze locked on Seraphine. No. I'm ending this. The blood mage's fingers twitched. A thin ripple of crimson magic pulsed forward, aimed not at Kale but at the cradles. Mara gasped. The protective cords flared faintly, silver, black, red, struggling against the pressure like shields under siege. Kale's shadows collided with the spell, absorbing it, but even Kale's power shuddered under the mage's forbidden runes. Seraphine's eyes gleamed. You can't defend 3 babies forever, she whispered. Kale's jaw tightened. And in that moment, because fear makes people reveal their true heart, Kale did something the council would never expect from a vampire king. He spoke softly, not to Seraphine. Tomorrow. Mara, he said, voice steady. Sing. Mara blinked, confused and terrified. What? Kale's eyes didn't leave the threat. Eloan's lullaby, he said. Now. Seraphine laughed. A song? That's your defense. The blood mage smirked, preparing another strike. Mara's throat tightened with panic, but she obeyed, because something in Kale's voice wasn't a request. It was trust.